Welcome to VALOR Conversations. I'm your host, Jay Trainer. VALOR Conversations is powered by CSB Ministries and is the official podcast of Christian Service Brigade. For more information, please visit csbministries.org. And now, on with the show. Hey everyone, welcome to VALOR Conversations. Joining me from out west, from the Sequoia Brigade Camp, is a longtime friend of Brigade and member of it, and his name's Karl Benson. He's been involved with Sequoia Brigade Camp since 1987. And Karl, welcome to this conversation. Welcome to this podcast. As we get started today, tell us a little bit about who Karl Benson is, and more specifically, your family dynamic.
Well, like you said, my name is Karl Benson. I'm originally from the Lake Tahoe area. I grew up mostly in the Sacramento area. Didn't grow up in a church. My wife and I have been together 40 years. We got 2 grown children. I have 2 grandsons, and just that's about it for now.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. Hey, that's the nature of things. So what sort of involvement have you had with Christian Service Brigade over the years? And, you know, relating it back to family for a second, you have described your family a little bit in greater detail. What's that meant for your family, and maybe specifically today for your grandkids?
Well, I have 2 grandsons. They're both a little bit young yet to be starting to come to camp. But my son, all the time that he was growing up, he had, during the summer, he'd come to camp with me, even if he wasn't old enough to go to the camp, because he's a very intelligent kid. He was always more comfortable around adults than he was kids his age. And so those are some really, really good times. So he's looking forward to when his sons get to come to camp and just hang out and do stuff, because those are some of his fondest memories.
It's amazing how that plays a role generationally from one generation to the next, like the importance of how we've experienced different things and how our kids want to also benefit from those same type of ministries, right?
Exactly. It's kind of interesting. My daughter was always jealous of the things that my son got to do, because Brigade is men and boys and all that. And I don't know, you're familiar with Bob Nass. I worked side by side with him for the 12 years that I was involved full-time at the camp. And Bob has 1 son and 4 daughters. And through a little daddy peer pressure, we started to do some father-daughter things, really still emphasizing men and developing men as good dads and giving them a vehicle. So our daughters got to participate in some of the things, and as you'll learn later, some of the coolest things we offer are father-son trips and father-daughter trips, really aimed at helping dads be better dads.
What's the scope of your involvement with Brigade over the years, not just from the camping perspective, but how have you been involved in what different capacities?
All right, well, I started off, got to give a shout out to the pastor. I went to college. I went to Westmont College. I have a degree in urban and youth ministry. And when my son came along, it was a bit of a surprise to everyone. And I planned on going to seminary. My college degree is more like almost like a pre-med student would have if he's going on to be a doctor. It was a pre-seminary degree. And seminary didn't happen because we had a brand new baby and kind of panicked a little bit, didn't really have a job, didn't really have a place to stay. So ended up living with my in-laws for a while. My son was the first grandchild for both sets of grandparents, so there was a lot of pressure for us to move closer to them. And Oakland First Covenant Church, they had the Stockade program, and one of the pastors there, Mr. Wally Glucklich, awesome man. One of his gifts was seeing what their gifts were and matching them up with the ministry they should be involved with. And I had never heard of Stockade or Christian Service Brigade. And he said, "You need to be in this program." And he said, it's kind of camping. It's boys and men hanging out, having fun. And so I went, and I was hooked. And ended up I was the stockade ranger and the battalion captain for a while there. Through that process, I met Bob Nass. He came to do his church visit. He was the regional director of pretty much all of California at the time. And he says, well, you should consider coming on brigade staff. You know, I told him my little life story, and Bob has this little smile when he wants you to do something, and he gives this little smile. And so we pursued that. And so 1988, I was able to get the support together and come on brigade staff full time. So I was on brigade staff from 88 through 2000. I was what you're now calling regional directors. I was regional director for Central California and the Pacific Northwest, because there wasn't any representation up there, and there's a lot of really good programs. And my parents had retired up there, so I kind of had a home base. I could go up and spend a month at a time at my parents' house and go visit the different brigade churches up in the Northwest. And Central California, we were looking for a spot. You know, we were in the Bay Area, and we were looking for a spot. And that same pastor, Wally Glucklich, he took a job at Modesto Covenant Church. And so my wife's lifelong best friend had just moved to Modesto, so pretty obvious to us that we need to move to Modesto. So we've been here since 1988, 1989. We moved to Modesto. So
wow. And right around that same time period in the late 1980s, you have indicated, at least to me, that you became involved with Sequoia Brigade Camp in the first place. Does that accurately fit the timeline roughly?
Yep. One of the things through meeting Bob, you know, through being a stockade ranger, he explained about camp and that they're always looking for people to lead trips. And I liked backpacking. I grew up doing a lot of backpacking and things like that. And so I believe it was 1986, maybe 1987, I led the backpacking trip through Sequoia Brigade Camp and saw how neat that was. And then basically got asked to come on the board of directors. And so in 1988 or 1987, I came on the board of directors of Sequoia Brigade Camp. I believe it was 87. And since I've been involved in various ways ever since. So.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So that being said, you've been around camping ministry for a long period of time. What is the value that you see in camping ministry? Why have you stuck with it for so long? I mean, I know that there are people that are going to listen to this podcast at some point that are like, I can buy in with camping ministry. I can get on board with it. But maybe for the parent out there that is questioning, should I send my kid to camp this summer? What's the value that you see with camping ministry? And again, specifically, you've stuck with it for so long. How come?
Well, there's a lot of different reasons. I didn't ever get to go to camp as a kid. And so the idea was always attractive to me. And then when I first became a brand new baby Christian, a girl I liked was going to work at this summer camp, this Mission Springs out in the Santa Cruz area in California. And so I said, I like this girl. So I applied, and I didn't get to be a counselor, but I got to be a dishwasher, and I ended up spending 5 summers there, ended up being the head cook. And that is where I met my wife. So Christian camps always have a sweet spot in my heart for me, because that's where I met my wife. Both my kids went to that camp. My daughter actually got married at that camp.
Oh, that's so cool.
But Sequoia Brigade Camp specifically, there's just so many reasons. We do a lot of super cool stuff. And over the years, we've kind of discovered that I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie, and we do some cool stuff. The first year I went on the whitewater canoe trip, I was like, this is the definition of adventure. We're out here and you're doing something that's exciting to teenage guys, and they're a tough crowd, and to find something that really is exciting to them and really hooks them, and the whole thing, we have quiet times every morning. We have a group Bible exploration. At some point during the day, we'll pull over to the side of the river if we're on a river trip and have our Bible exploration right there, because what better place to get in touch with God than out in the nature away from all the distractions of the world, stuff like that. And then in the evenings, we always have a campfire program, some fun songs, some serious songs, and we always have a good message. And usually on the older kids camps, after that, there's a lot of time just talking, and it's amazing where the conversations go. And so it's always, when I was in college, the summer camp, I worked during the summers, my college summers at a camp, and it was always kind of a chance. It was kind of my base. I'd see what had changed during the year. I'd see how I had grown during the year, because that was like my baseline. You know, scientists do a baseline study on whatever their subject is. So that was always my baseline. So I got to see how I changed and how things went. So it's still the same thing. So that's why I stuck with it, because I like it and it's fun. So
that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit more about the specifics of Sequoia Brigade Camp. What sort of programs do you have going on? I mean, you talk about adventure and the backpacking and whitewater canoeing and whatnot. What is it about Sequoia that makes it unique compared to maybe some other camps that are out there?
The biggest thing that makes us unique is we don't own a property. We do mostly trips. We do a couple what we call classic camps, where we rent a facility. You know, your typical in-camp bows and arrows and BB guns and canoes. We rent facilities for the couple 3 weeks that we do those type of things. And those, against your classic camp, overlaying those, we also have father-son and father-daughter camps, which we think, I mean, you see a few camps doing the father-son and the father-daughter things. And again, those are awesome. And it really gives dad a chance just to be dad. And some dads may not know how to share the gospel with their kids or introduce them to the idea of a quiet time or a memory verse. And it's a way to do that. You're in the boat with a bunch of other dads. We have a just dad's time where the counselors take the kids and go off and do something. And we have time just the dads kind of comparing notes about being a dad, being a young Christian dad with a small, you know, starting a family. And it's very interesting. A lot of the things I learned about parenting were being in that boat with other Christian men as a stockade ranger. But our biggest specialty is the trip camps. We have a lot of different trip camps that, again, we just think the wilderness setting, removed from all the distractions and all the bells and whistles. I've always felt closer to God there, and the whole operating premise of our camp is to get kids out in the wilderness, maybe a little bit out of their comfort zone. And but we have all kinds of trip camps. They've really evolved over the years through the interests of the people on the board. We've been doing a scuba camp for over 30 years because the president of our board, Mr. Kevin Osborne, he owns a dive shop. And so we started doing that. And that's actually, for the years that I wasn't on the board and when I went into law enforcement for a while to make a little money, to get a little retirement going. But I still went as a camper to scuba camp every year because that was the most fun thing.
That's cool.
But we have mountain bike tour around Lake Tahoe area. We used to do road bike tours, but it's just to not have to deal with the traffic and all that. It's much nicer to be off on the trails. We have whitewater canoe trips. We have the scuba trip. We have surfing camp, and that's another one of the ones. It had always been for teenage guys, and then some of the daughters gave us a little peer pressure. So now we have a separate surfing camp for girls, run by women, and that's a lot of blast. That's down in San Diego, suffering for Jesus on the beach. You know, but, one of the most, I think, is a unique camp is our base camp. Base camp, we call it an introduction to trip camping. There's 4 different modules. It's aimed more at the junior high aged guys, but it could also be, you know, there's no upper limit on any of our camps. Like I said, I've been a 60-year-old camper on some of our trip camps just because they're fun. But base camp is an introduction to trip camping. We have 4 modules. You can pick ahead of time, you pick which one you want. It's sailing, there's backpacking, there's mountain biking, and there's whitewater canoeing. Excuse me for a sec. We meet at a central location. We usually have a campground up in the high Sierras. Again, this is one we rent for the week. But the boys show up, they're divided into their modules, and they spend the first day and a half, 2 days kind of in this camp. They'll go on, the backpackers will go on a little hike, but they're learning how to cook the food and prepare the meals, and they're doing their Bible exploration and things like that. And they're learning about their chosen craft. And then they go on a short trip, a 3-day trip, 3 days, 2 nights out. The mountain bikers will go out on a bike trip for somewhere, and the backpackers will go out on a backpacking trip for somewhere. The canoers will go on a couple different good beginner rivers. They start out really easy, and they get a couple of rapids in them, but it's not going to scare the snot out of a beginning canoer.
Yeah, doing type 1, type 2 type stuff, right?
Yeah, 2s, maybe get into some 3s after a while as the trip progresses. It depends on how the kids are. We have a lot of options, a lot of super cool rivers in California, so we have a lot of options. And the sailors pretty much stay there at the base camp that we have, because we usually do it by a lake, and they basically sail and eat all week long. Sailing is our energy efficient camp for campers who are a little more energy efficient. Pretty much laying around working on your tan, eating. And then they come back after their short trip, back to the big group, all 4 modules together, and they share their experiences, and they kind of wrap up their gear. The thing is, if they liked doing that, say you went on a canoe trip, you liked it, you had a blast, come back later in the summer, go on our week-long canoe trip. Once every 3 years, we do a 2-week-long canoe trip way up in Canada. Wow. I've been a professional wilderness guide for 40 years, and I've never been so far out in the boonies as I am when I'm up there in Canada. It's amazing. Wow. Literally been chased by a grizzly bear twice. So it's an adventure. But the thing with base camp is it's a safe way to try out something. If they get on a canoe trip and good grief, I don't like this, holy moly, they're only stuck for a couple days. Right. And then next year, maybe they'll try something else. Maybe they'll try sailing and or backpacking. But then, if they like it, they can come back and do a bigger, better trip. If they don't like it, it's pretty low risk. They don't hike that far. They don't boat that far from civilization. It's a pretty good way to try something. And if you don't like it, you're not in that bad a shape.
It's almost like a sampler.
So yeah, pretty much.
which sounds very it sounds very, very much like it would feed at least a little bit of that adventure snapshot, but not necessarily the whole taste. And if you have the chance to go later on, like you said, I think that's a neat opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, I forget how afraid of everything I was when I was a junior hire. Right. It's a big world and things are scary. So it's a chance to try things, in a pretty safe environment. And if you don't like it, it's not that scary.
Right. It's a limited time as opposed to something that might seem a little bit longer term if you just launch right into it, which is huge. So program wise, you have these summertime activities that you are involved with. Do you have any themes that you're working on for this specific summer for diving in for your campers? And are there maybe some other non-summer season activities that you have going on under the Sequoia Brigade umbrella?
Okay, that's a 2-part question.
Yeah.
Really, we don't have a theme, like our Vacation Bible School at our church has a theme, this year it's Wild West or something like that. We don't, because each trip kind of is its own theme, okay. But we'll have a Bible exploration and that material, their quiet times and their group Bible exploration and the campfire. They'll pick a theme as far as that goes. And Josh Tallman, the Southern California director, he actually grew up in Sequoia Brigade Camp and through Stockade and all that. And Dave Gregg also grew up, he was a junior counselor, and he came as a camper, and then he's a junior counselor, and then he was a senior counselor, and now we sucked him in, and he's the regional director for Central California. But anyway, Josh Tallman is putting together our Bible exploration for this summer. And so I don't yet know what the theme is going to be.
Okay.
Sometimes it's, the 7 points of valor, and, one year it's just focused on the armor of God very specifically, each day really dig into a piece of armor, and it should be stimulating. Actually, last summer, we have a specialty trip we do once every 3 years. It's called Wilderness Adventure Camp. I designed it years ago. I went on an Outward Bound program. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes, I am.
As a graduation present from my parents from high school. And those kind of trips, it's called stress camping. It's designed to take kids have no idea what they're capable of, in my opinion. They have no idea the potential, especially teenage guys. And it's designed to take them out of their comfort zone and to show them that they're really capable of doing a lot more than they think they can. And it's a real confidence builder for them, physically and spiritually. And kind of forgot where I was going with that train of thought, but
That's okay.
So and last summer I was on that trip, and I actually had to call Bob Nass in the middle of the night. He was not on that trip, and I was sitting. I kind of have a thing with my ears. It's an attention thing, but I can hear every conversation going on in a room. Like when I go out to dinner, it's very frustrating. I can hear the people way over by the kitchen talking about, their dog or whatever. But I'm sitting in this room, and there's like 6 or 7 intense, super deep, ridiculously over my head intellectual conversations that are going on amongst the campers on the camp and some of the staff that was on the camp. And it was just, they weren't talking about silly things that teenage guys talk about. They were way deep into some it was profound enough that I had to call Bob, and I said, Bob, you won't believe this. Because we had been involved in a camp the week before where it was like pulling teeth getting these guys to do anything spiritual. And I was like, wow, this is night and day compared to last week. And it was very exciting. So.
Very cool. Very cool. As we begin to wind down here, what are some other passions that drive your ministry personally, and also the ministry under, again, the Sequoia Brigade umbrella? In other words, I guess maybe this is a better way to ask it. What's the win? What's the victory for you as a camping professional when you put together these different programs?
The relationships. I mean, really all of the things that we do at camp are vehicles to develop relationships. Bob Nass used to say, even explaining what the whole Christian Service Brigade ministry is about, he said, if you take a man and you take a boy and you stick them in a room and you tell them to talk, they just kind of sit there and grunt at each other. But if you take the same man and the same boy and you stick them in the same room with some hammers and nails and say, build, they're going to start talking eventually and build something cool at the same time. So all of the stuff that we do are just vehicles for building discipling relationships. The strength of our camp is our junior counselors. We get some of these teenage guys that have usually come as a camper, and they grow up and they see the value of the camp, and they want to grow themselves deeper spiritually, and they come and basically they run the camp. They will lead the Bible exploration times. They'll do stuff at the father-son and father-daughter camp. They run all the camp because that way the dads can just be dads, and the senior counselors, the men, can just be there to focus on the spiritual part of it, and the junior counselors run the nuts and bolts of it. And they come back because the relationship they've had with us, again, like I mentioned, Josh Tallman and Dave Gregg and Bob Nass on the other end. Bob mentored me and I mentored these guys, and now they're mentoring the next couple of generations. And Dave Gregg's son Josh is on the camp board now, and he's married and all grown up, and just the relationships is the value. Like when I left law enforcement, it wasn't under the best circumstances, and I really found out who all my true friends were, and it was every single one of them was someone in my church, specifically that I met through stockade or camp. And you get to know each other on a super deep level when you're knee deep in camp all summer long, and you're in the trenches with these guys. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about them. But the biggest advertisement for me when I'm recruiting junior counselors is you'll be lifelong friends with those dudes the rest of your life, because you've been through some stuff. You've all grown together, and working side by side. Those are bonds you can't ever break.
Yeah, the vulnerability factor, right? There's a genuineness that flows from those very delicate situations at times.
Yeah, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I was speaking at Dave Gregg's battalion, and I'd kind of hadn't used up my time yet, but I was done with my story, and they're like, "Tell us Dave stories. Tell us." They wanted to know the dirt on Dave, just because you go through stuff, and if you're growing spiritually, there's going to be spiritual warfare, and there's how you handle the conflicts and how you handle the problems. We all learn and we all grow from, and that's the beauty of it. Just things, like I said, I met my wife at a summer camp. Things are more intense because it's a finite period, and you just it's a lot easier to open up. I have a hard time coming out of my shell. It's a lot easier to open up when I'm only going to be here 12 weeks. And if I spend 10 weeks fiddle-faddling, playing games, letting people get to know me, guess what? I only have 2 weeks of depth. Yeah. So people open up right away. But we get tired, and so people get cranky, and you see, sometimes you may hear some words that you maybe shouldn't hear, and it's real. It's very real.
Yeah, very raw, and very cool at the same time, because of the relationships that flow from it. Karl, any final words or thoughts for our audience today? Any additional things that you'd like to share before we sign off for our time today?
Well, we're still looking for a few good men for summer camp, to be senior counselors. But just if you're interested in the camp and some of our trips, just Sequoia Brigade Camp.org. Got a pretty cool website. Just spent some time fluffing it up. So come check us out.
Awesome. Well, Karl, thank you for joining me here today for our discussion on VALOR Conversations on this podcast. It's truly an incredible opportunity to partner with other ministries that are like-minded and like-hearted within the Christian Brigade family, within the Christian Service Brigade family. And so, Karl, thank you so much for jumping in. And what's the website again?
It's just www.sequoiabrigadecamp.org.
Awesome. Karl, thanks so much.
All right, Jay.
Looking forward to having you on again in the future. Thanks for tuning into VALOR Conversations with your host, Jay Trainer. VALOR Conversations is powered by CSB Ministries and is the official podcast of Christian Service Brigade. For more information, please visit csbministries.org. And in the meantime, stay tuned for more VALOR Conversations coming your way soon.